Hello YouTube. Hold up, let me check if my mic is working. Sometimes this thing doesn't even work. Yeah, it's working right now. Hey, what's good YouTube? It is your host, Stacey Samurai here, and welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see clearly from the thumbnail, we're here for another part 2. What if Asta had Acnologia's powers? So thank y'all so much for tuning into this What If. I'm honestly really excited for this part. And honestly, this What If series has been going on quite long, and it's nearing its end. But I'm happy for it, as I think I did it pretty good. Sorry, I just ate some food. I think I did pretty good. It was a long and lasting journey. I don't know if this will be the last part. Maybe the next part might be. I don't really know for sure. But hey, let's enjoy the journey while it's still happening, you know? And besides that, guys, I don't really got much else to announce. So thank y'all so much for tuning in. And either way, let's begin.
You're never gonna make it, you're not good enough. There's a million other people with the same stuff. You really think you're different? Man, you must be kidding. Think you're gonna hit it, but you just don't get it. It's impossible, it's not probable, you're irresponsible. Too many obstacles, you gotta stop it, yo. You gotta take it slow, you can't be a pro. Don't waste your time no more. Who the fuck are you to tell me what to do?
Alright guys, let's begin this What If. Hopefully you guys do enjoy. And either way, let's begin. So we now begin this What If with the battle between Asta and against Zagred. Or Zagred. I don't really know how to pronounce his name properly, but we're moving on. Now, of course, the word demon would instantly begin trying to attack Asta and and instantly both of them would then dodge out of the way with in his hybrid dragon form as he dashes towards him. Dragon Slayer arts. Dragon Claw, he would say as he throws the attack, but Zagred would actually dodge out of the way of it. Really? I expected more out of you, he would say. But Asta would then have a smile on his face, as this when Zagred would then suddenly be sent flying, as Asta's attack was nothing more but a feint, as his actual attack had actually hit Zagred as he gets sent flying. However, as he was sent flying though, would then suddenly appear right behind him, using the spirit dance, as he would then suddenly slash down with his sword. Huh, you're not gonna get away from me that easily. And Asta, stop trying to hog the fight all by yourself. Oh, come on, You know I can't help myself, Asta would say. At this, Zagred would then be sent flying as he ends up regaining his balance as he stares angrily at Asta and Okay, I'm beginning to have enough of your annoyance, he would say. At this, he would then begin to apply a ginormous amount of gravity on both Asta and causing to actually fall down to his knees. But Asta, he would resist it as he stares at Zagred. Were you supposed to do something? Zagred's eyes will widen as he tries applying more and more gravity, this time actually causing to collapse on the ground as he tries and forces his body to get up, but he was perfectly fine, as if this was nothing to him. Alright, well, if you're not going to do anything, I might as well make my own move. At this, Asta smiles, as this one suddenly he would then extend both of his arms, as suddenly magic begins to pull from them, actually looking like wings. Dragon Slayer arts. Wing attack, he would shout mentally, as this one suddenly he would then appear in front of Zagred as he would then suddenly slam him hard with the wing attack, causing him to be sent flying and crashing down. At this, now feeling the gravitational pressure get off of him, would then get up as he dashes towards him, creating a a wind blade once again. At this, just as he does, he would try slashing at Zagred's neck, trying to end it all, as Zagred, who was seeing this, would then begin to get pissed off. Okay, now I seriously had enough of this. At this is when wouldn't suddenly be surprised as some type of portal or something opened up, as multiple swords would then be sent flying, as has no choice but to have no choice but to dodge out of the way, although some of the blades do end up cutting him. And as for Asta, Zagred would then suddenly end up shooting his magic, but this time instead of just applying gravity down on Asta, he decided to actually shoot it, like making the gravity way less around Asta, causing him to just casually float in midair before collapsing on the wall. At this, using the opportunity, Zagred would then look at both boys, saying that they had become quite a nuisance and that he would return to finish them off later, but he had more important business to take care of, as he would then suddenly end up shooting up, creating a hole as he dashes through it. However, just as he does though, this one suddenly Asta, not wanting to leave such a perfect opponent behind, would then suddenly end up getting up, forcing away from the gravity as he ends up using his wings to fly, and actually grabbing hold of one of Zagred's legs. No way. You're not leaving. After all, I'm having way too much fun right now. Also, it says he had a maniac look on his face, causing Zagred to actually stagger back, before suddenly he ends up creating a bunch of magical swords and shooting them at Asta. Asta looks at these swords with a, of course, a disgusted expression as he then opens his mouth, although he would then actually end up being a little bit surprised as some of those swords were not actually made out of magic. So due to that, Asta ends up getting he ends up getting hit by the swords, but they shatter upon contact with his skin, as like I said, Asta was a beast. And this dragon transformation is legit, like his body has dragon skills, so of course it's not gonna just pierce through it easily. This was a once again surprise Zagred until he ends up realizing that this kid was not letting go, as Asta then pull him down and punch him in the face. At this, seeing Asta once again getting into action, will then fly up there. As Zagred seeing that now both boys' attention on him, he realized just how much of a problem that he was in. Dang it, they're both an annoyance. I could easily deal with them, but right now I have much more important tasks to take care of. Dang, this one is stubborn, he would think as he once again gets hit by Asta before having enough. He would then make a ginormous pitchfork as he stabs it into Asta's stomach. However, the thing is, Asta wasn't even it didn't even pierce Asta's skin. At this, Asta laughs. I'm sorry, but you need way more power to do that. But you can handle it, right? You can exert more power. I can feel it. At this, Zagred once again gets terrified before finally he ends up having enough as he ends up shooting out his wings, actually pushing Asta back slightly, as he has no choice but to actually legit cut off his own leg. As Asta ends up actually falling off as he glares angrily at him. I'm not letting you escape. No way. At this, Asta once again spreads out his dragonic wings as he stares directly at Zagred, who ends up blitzing out of there. That kid, what is wrong with him? Zagred would say, and which, by the way, guys, I just found out how to pronounce his name. Apparently, it's Zagred, but it's spelled like Zagred, so I kept saying it. It's weird, but for the meantime, I'm just gonna call him Zagred, okay? So with that being said, Zagred ends up regenerating his leg, as of course he can, as he ends up approaching the room to where Licht was. As for Asta, he of course not wanting to give up, would then begin to try chasing after him, but this one suddenly Yuna wouldn't get in the way. Asta, stop, look. At this, Asta stops as this one suddenly he then smells a familiar magic presence, as he then turns around to see Patry. Except that this time he undergone the Dark Elf transformation. As after all the trauma that Zagred had impacted on him, plus the fact that Zagred had affected him, he had transformed into a Dark Elf. At this, also sighs as he really wanted to go after the Word Demon, but I guess he could use this guy as a warm-up. So with that being said, Patry would then suddenly create ginormous amounts of dark light spears as he ends up shooting them at Asta and in a blind rage. Now, Yuna would dodge out of the way using the spirit dance, but Asta would just absorb the blaze, eating up the magic, only for him to actually wrinkle up a little bit. I'm gonna have to get used to this taste. Seriously, what's with these demons and their magic? It's so disgusting, Asta would think. As legit, it tasted as if he was eating nothing more like a bunch of plums or something that's extremely bitter. To which Asta did not enjoy it. But in the end of the day, it still was a ginormous meal, and so to that, Asta just replenished his already ginormous magic reserves. So with that, Patry just begins to attack everything in a murderous rage before finally one of his blades almost actually end up killing Raya, but Asta wouldn't appear right in front of it and end up destroying it in an instant. Listen, if you're going to be here and play as a damsel in distress, I recommend you leave. You're no use here. Now, of course, hearing this, Raya once again gets angry. You have no idea what you're talking about, human. Alright? Now's not the time, alright? I can reach Patry. He just needs to snap out of it, okay? At this, he tries getting up to talk to Patry as a friend, but Patry didn't listen to him as he straight up attacks Raya, as Raya can do nothing more but look on with disheartened expression. Now, Asta seeing this has no choice but to save Raya and him, considering the fact that if he didn't move, then Raya would be, KO'd. And while this was happening, though, this is when Asta then had an idea. Listen, you're no use, okay? And your friend looks like he's long gone, alright? So I'm just gonna go and do myself a favor. As this one suddenly Asta went and throw Raya down into the hole where he came up from. As this would cause Raya to actually gasp as he looks at Asta, but this one Asta wouldn't say the words. There's even a chance I could save him, I will. So go ahead and heal up and stop being so useless. As Raya can do nothing more but look. He didn't lie to me at all, he would say, as Asta's words hold no lie whatsoever, as Raya had no choice but to put his trust into Asta as he fell. As we end up looking around, we see that in a different location, we will see Mimosa. She was currently just moving around the entire area. She had joined into the group for the search party, but unfortunately, well, she was kind of lost and by herself. However, as she does, she ends up seeing this ginormous hole. As she doesn't know why, but she thinks it was created by Asta, considering the fact that he was so far the only one who had that much monstrous power to just go through the entire tower in an instant. However, as she does, she would then see a man falling from the sky, so she ends up activating her magic, which this is when we end up seeing that it was Raya who fell down here, and he was passed out. And of course, Mimosa being Mimosa, seeing all the injuries, she begins to heal Raya, as Raya right now can do nothing more but rest, hoping that, Lick, or better yet, Patry will be okay. So back with the fight, Asta and Yuno are now currently fighting against Patry, and honestly, Yuno has no idea exactly what to do in this situation. I can keep fighting as much as I want, but at the end of the day, if I can't do him any real damage, well, I would eventually end up running out of stamina, he would say. As Patry, at this point, this man, he didn't seem to be running out of any magic at all, and in fact, he just seems to have an endless amount of it. And while Asta can just dodge these easily or just eat them, didn't have that luxury. Dang it, once again, I'm getting left behind. You know what says? He's pushing himself even further. While Asta, he was currently focusing on Patry as he realized that the more time he spent here, the more times that the word demon was going to get away. And I'm not going to allow that. At this, Asta would then suddenly end up vanishing as he ends up rushing towards Patry, who ends up sending a bunch of dark light spears at Asta, who ends up breaking them or eating them before finally landing right in front of Patry. Listen, you're nothing more than a nuisance. I don't give a damn about how sad you were. I don't give a damn about your tragic backstory. I am missing out on a fight, and it's all because of you. So snap out of it. At this, also when it suddenly punched Patry so hard that it ends up actually sending shockwaves throughout the entire room, as Patry's face would then be slammed onto the ground as he coughs up blood. At this, he once again gets angry as this one begins to actually speak. Shut up, you damn human. How do you know what I'm going through? He would shout. At this, Asta sighs as this one suddenly, he ends up, once again punching him in the face, actually knocking him out, as Asta would look around. Now, Asta can't deny, he doesn't exactly know what these elves went through, but at the same time, he knew one thing. Even if he were to go through what they experienced, it doesn't really matter, because in the end of the day, Asta would always be him. Because to Asta, living in the past didn't seem too much fun. In fact, the only thing that Asta could think that was fun was living in the present or living in the future, as that's actually where you can find things to look forward to. So he can clearly say that even if he were to go in the situation of the elves, at the end of the day, it wouldn't change who he was. So as Asta would look down at Patry, he can only do nothing more but hope that the guy would eventually end up learning his lesson. However, as Asta would then suddenly open his mouth, as he begins to undo what the demon had done to him, as well as the fact that, erasing all that magic he just got, Asta also begins to realize one thing, and that's the fact that William, the captain, was actually, licked. Or better yet, Patry, I mean. So this would actually surprise Asta as he still ends up absorbing the magic, as eventually after a while, Patry ends up returning back to normal, but he's still knocked unconscious. Well, now that he's no longer useful, time to send him back. At this, Asta would instantly pick up Patry's just, unconscious body. So he wouldn't throw it down the hole as well. Before turning to come on, let's go. At this, Asta once again enters into the dragon transformation, which by the way, he exits out of it for like a few seconds. Because like I said, that dragon transformation does end up taking quite a lot out of Asta, as he really needs to concentrate in order to use it. But besides that, Asta ends up entering the transformation before suddenly end up flying into the hole that Zagred had went into, with Yuno watching on in shock. He really doesn't look back, does he? He would think. He was also rethinking about the entire fight, and he realized just how much he needs to go. Asta, I won't be left behind by you, he would think. As this one suddenly he ends up sprouting his own wings as well as he flies up into the hole. Now back with Zagred, he ends up encountering Licht as that battle had gone on. And of course, Zagred being him, he ends up fighting against, Licht. And Licht, although as powerful as he is, he doesn't stand that much of a chance against him by himself. And to think this is you and you're only half awakened. It's such a shame that you won't be able to reincarnate. At this, Zagred has a smile on his face as this one suddenly he prepares to actually end Licht. However, as he does, he would then sense familiar mana approaching. Dang it, he would think, as this one suddenly bursting out of the hole, he would then see Asta and Yuno, as both of them had a smile on their faces. You won't get away from us that easily, both of them would shout. At this, Zagred would then get pissed off, as Licht, seeing Asta and Yuno, would then actually try dashing over to them to fight, but this one suddenly he would then stop. At this, he begins to gain more and more memories, as this one suddenly he would then fall back to the ground, as he was slowly beginning to fully complete the awakening. Great. Looks like he's coming back after all. And don't matter. I'll kill him either way. At this, Zagred tries making a ginormous sword to cut through Licht, but this is when Asta and would then appear in front of him as he destroyed the blade in an instant. Your fight is with dust, you bastard! This pissing off Zagred as he ends up telling Asta and that they're nothing to him, as he ends up creating once again ginormous swords as he shoots them at Asta and but and Asta end up dodging out of the way, as Asta would then suddenly appear right in front of him with the dragon's claw before slamming it into his side. Would also appear right beside him as he ends up using his wind blade to cut on the side and his other side as well, giving him 2 ginormous wounds and causing him to wince in pain. Alright, that's enough of this. This is no longer entertaining, he would say. At this when suddenly he then turns to Asta and as both of them prepare to attack, as this when he then says the word, bind. At this, we will then see as dark rope begins to wrap around both Asta and holding them down. As this one suddenly, as Asta tries to eat them, he realizes once again that these things are like physical objects. These aren't made of magic. I believe that it's finally time for me to end both of you, he would shout. As this one suddenly, he ends up making an iron spear, but not one. He creates multiple of them, as he also ends up binding Licht as well, as he was in the middle of his awakening. At this, he ends up looking at all of them as he has a smile on his face, ready to end this little game. He ends up shooting the iron spear at Asta, as just as, Asta was about to get up and begin to counter this when suddenly he ends up seeing a dark slash appearing, cutting through like a large amount of them, as well as we would then see these blue roses and these vines begin to wrap around and defend all of them. Now, this will surprise Asta, until Asta ends up, reading. Or better yet, he ends up sensing the magic that was behind this. I should have known that you would end up being here, Captain. Asta would say, as this one suddenly he ends up seeing both Yami and Charlotte, or the elf reincarnation of her, as Charlotte ends up running over to Licht, asking him if he was okay, but Licht, once again, like I said, he was underneath his transformation. While Yami ends up walking over to Asta and saying that it seemed to be in a little bit of a trouble. To which Asta scoffs, saying that he was going to break out any second, and it's just that Yami stole his spotlight. This ends up causing the both of them to have a good laugh as they end up enjoying the moment, but now was not the time, as the rest of the battle was now going to continue on as they turned their attention to the word demon. Now, to his surprise, that cut that Yami had released, it actually ended up giving him damage as his magic begins to go out of whack because of it. To think there will be another human who could do me damage. Who is he? How can these insects actually be injuring me? Zagred would then shout as he would then get an angry and pissed off expression on his face. Before suddenly he ends up breaking into a laugh. What, you think this is the end? Not by a long shot. It's about time I show you humans and you elves your place. As this one suddenly we begin to see a dark corrupt amount of mana begins to shoot out of him, as this dark and purple like substance begins to flood out the entire area, as Yami, Asta, and the rest of the group would then be surrounded by it, as the rest of the sludge ends up actually overtaking the rest of the Shadow Palace. Now, this is where we then turn our point of view to Finral and the rest of the Black Bulls, as right now on the outside they end up taking care of a few more of the reincarnated elves, the ones who are still willing to fight. They also end up saving a few more people, as of course they have to save them. But while doing so, they eventually end up running into Nero, who ends up actually appearing right in front of Finral. Oh, it's you. What do you want? Finral will say as he ends up looking at Nero. At this, Nero ends up actually speaking, surprising him, as this is when she ends up telling him to follow her, as this is where they end up going on that journey until eventually end up finding the very first Wizard King. You end up getting the whole entire backstory between the two before suddenly he ends up reviving the very first Wizard King, and now that he's revived, he instantly heads to the Shadow Palace to help out with the Word Demon. As we now turn our attention to inside the Shadow Palace once again, you will see Yami trying to slash at these, purple sludges, and his slashes weren't even doing anything to them. We see Charlotte trying to do the same thing, but once again, this ends up causing a few more problems. And to make it even worse, There's also Zagred, who ends up shooting out a bunch of these swords at them, which was getting annoying. At this, Yami sighs. He ends up turning to Asta, asking if he can do something about it, to which Asta ends up getting a smile on his face. Obviously. At this, Asta ends up opening his mouth as he ends up absorbing the, purple sludge. As Zagred would then look at Asta once again with a pissed off expression. Alright, it's finally time to get rid of you first, since you're the most annoying one of these insects. At this, Zagred would then create a spear as he shoots it at Asta, to which Yami was about to intercept it, and Asta was actually about to counter it himself. But once again, this one suddenly piercing through the sludge itself and appearing in front of the attack. We would then see none other than the very first Wizard King, and accompanying him was none other than Nero. At this, everyone would be surprised, including Asta, who ends up feeling that magical power, and of course obviously wants to fight it, or heck, even eat it. This guy was stunning on him, bro. It was like a five course like meal right in front of you. And Asta was obviously already want to take a bite, but he already knew right now they had bigger things to worry about. It's been a while, old enemy, the first Wizard King would say as he turns his attention to Zagred, who ends up laughing at the very first Wizard King, remembering about the events that had occurred, and ended up mocking him about it, calling them a fool and how he planned everything from the start. Now this would of course end up pissing off the first Wizard King, but this is when suddenly a light slash would then be sent at Zagred, causing him to dodge out of the way. And exactly who are you to talk to my friend that way, huh? At this is when suddenly we end up seeing Licht end up appearing as well, as he finally ended up regaining all his memories, as both the first Wizard King and Licht would then smile at each other. It's good to see you, old friend, both of them would say at the same time. This would be a very heartwarming and wholesome moment, while also staring at Nero, as he ends up smiling. I knew it was you, Asta would say as he ends up smiling at Nero. At this, Nero nods her head as she acknowledges Asta and doesn't treat him like a fool, which although Asta does look kind of barbaric and he does not have as much knowledge as most people, she can't deny that this kid was very resourceful and he actually knew how to take care of himself. She wasn't making fun of him. Although she would admit that the top of Asta's head was comfortable to sit on. So with that being said, Asta and Yuno, and now Nero, along with the first Wizard King and the entire group, were now facing off against Zagred, who ends up once again realizing the situation he was in. You guys, it took me this long. It took me forever to get to this point. And I'm not going to let you take this away from me. No way. At this, Asta ends up laughing as he was saying, oh, I'm definitely going to take this away from you. He would shout as he ends up charging up a ginormous amount of dragon energy as he begins to concentrate as he looks even more like a dragon this time. Now, this would actually end up catching the very first Wizard King's attention as he was very interested in Asta's magic, but he realized that now was not the time. At this, Zagred would then begin to enchant a ginormous amount of magic, but just as he does, this is when both the first Wizard King and Lich would then create a combined attack, as both of them would then slam Zagred with a powerful slash, wiping out a large amount of the sludge that was around, and also end up actually nearly killing him. However, that was not enough to kill Zagred, as Asta would then shout out, saying that they need to dodge, as suddenly multiple pitchforks began to rain from above, causing all of them to dodge out of the way or deflect them. As this is when suddenly we end up seeing Zagred's heart as he ends up speaking the words heal, recovering all his entire body, except this time it looks more grotesque, as this one suddenly he ends up shouting out the word clone. This one suddenly we end up seeing multiple Zagreds ends up appearing all around, causing this battle to get even more disastrous as each one of them would then put their guard up and prepare for combat. At this, Nero would actually have to stay by the first Wizard King as he had to waste up quite a large amount of his mana for that attack, and it seems like it wasn't enough. Now, seeing all these clones around us, they also began to shout out their own word magic, shouting out as many weapons as they could, throwing them at them, increasing the gravity. Things were looking quite bad for them. It's okay. After all, it's already our win, Asta would shout. At this one somebody would then begin to sense a ginormous amount of magic begin to shoot out of Asta, as this when the space around magic begins to get warped. This would of course surprise everyone who was inside the room with them, as everyone who was also battling around would also sense like the entire warping going on, as they actually see it. At this, Asta challenged a bunch of energy, as he ended up challenging it to his fists. Dragon Slayer art. True power of the end. At this, Asta's fist began to glow a dangerous purple-like color before Asta would then suddenly jump up into the air as he then slams the attack into Zagred. Now Zagred tries to stop Asta as he shoots multiple spears at them, but each time he does, the fist that was extended and shooting and shot at him would then suddenly end up destroying each one of them that came into contact. How could I be beaten by this pathetic human? He would shout. As Asta was approaching, he ends up actually seeing a ginormous dragon as it opens his mouth and swallows Zagred whole, as he can do nothing more but watch as the attack connects to his stomach. Now this one was surprising as Zagred's heart would then suddenly end up getting absorbed and ripped to shreds as the power of the end ended up destroying the entire top of the Shadow Palace, destroying Zagred and wiping out the rest of the clones as everyone else was blown back by the power, as Asta was letting out a ginormous roar which sounded like a dragon. As you would then begin to see smoke and dust begin to kick up everywhere, as a ginormous flash would then suddenly begin to die down. The rest of them can do nothing more but watch as they wonder exactly in anticipation about what happened. Before suddenly they end up seeing Asta as the dragon transformation would then collapse on him. Before suddenly he ends up beginning to fall from the sky. Now Nero, seeing this, would rush over to Asta as she ends up catching him, of course, as Asta was just laying there with a smile on his face. As the entire Shadow Palace dimension then begins to collapse. Guys, we gotta go now. At this, they would then nod as they end up leaving. They actually realize that Asta's attack created some type of hole or wormhole that was legit bringing the Shadow Palace along with it, as it was legit collapsing in it. As outside in the real world, they'll then see the Shadow Palace begin to actually collapse on itself, causing multiple amounts of destruction, as the rest of the Magic Knights that were still there will then try to defend the Clover Kingdom as they tried putting up a barrier to defend the attack, although it was not doing anything at all. Luckily for them, the Black Bulls also came in there as well, along with the other members of the different Magic Knight squads, as they began to pull more and more magic into this barrier to hold it in together. Because if they didn't, legit the explosion would take out the entire Clover Kingdom. This was no joke. As eventually after that, this ended up causing the rest of them to actually end up escaping, and eventually end up causing Patry and Riot to wake up as they also end up escaping as well. So eventually the entire group ends up leaving safely as they had won against the Word Demon. So we now eventually end up doing a change of scene as we see everyone exiting out of the dimension as they're now landing safe, as the rest of the dimension ends up collapsing on itself, getting legit warped away to who knows where, as there was nothing left of it or any sign of it at all. At this, everyone was surprised about the outcome, but they were happy. At least everyone got out of there alive. Well, except for Zagred, but who cares about him? As while doing so, Nero would end up putting Asta down, as this would end up catching the attention of both Mimosa and Noel, who end up shouting at him and worried as they run over to him and begin to heal him. And after that, we also end up having a quite heartwarming moment as we see Licht and the first Wizard King say their goodbyes to each other, as Licht would end up undoing the reincarnation spell, setting free the rest of the reincarnated elves, but only leaving Veto, Raya, and Fauna as they have no choice but to continue living on since they had gone artificial bodies and everything, and they weren't reincarnated. They just became alive again. I don't exactly know how it worked, but I guess it just makes sense. I don't know what to tell you. And moving on, we also end up getting a tearful goodbye from Nero and the first Wizard King, as they end up sharing their final moments together, with the first Wizard King actually turning to Yuno, who of course, flinches back from the attention, as he ends up telling Yuno that he's actually very excited to see who's going to become the next Wizard King. At this, Yuno would nod as he ends up saying and declaring proudly that it was going to be him, before the first Wizard King's attention then turned to a sleeping Asta, who was smiling peacefully, while both Noel and Mimosa were just, looming over him. But that boy right there, he's definitely going to be something that far surpasses even me, or any Wizard King, in fact. As he could already see that Asta's destiny was far beyond anything he has seen before, and he was very interested to see how or what outcome he will create. As with that, we end up getting the goodbye to the Wizard King and putting an end to the Elf Reincarnation arc. As we're now moving on. So we now do a time skip, as eventually after that the kingdom then begins to rebuild itself, cleaning and rinsing off their wounds. As after a while, all of them begin to get together to help out. Asta, you would actually be surprised, but he actually wasn't knocked out unconscious. In fact, after the whole fight and after seeing that Zagred was gone, he just went to sleep instantly, as he had pretty much been the entire time sleeping peacefully, not really having any injuries. Although, if there was one thing that was a problem, it was the fact that his muscles ached from going into the dragon transformation, and also pulling off a spell like that, considering the fact that, heck, even Asta didn't know how he pulled it off. It was almost as if his body did it on pure instinct. But he did find out more about this power, so of course he's going to try studying it and try finding more about it. And by studying, I mean he's going to train more with it to see how much further he can push his Dragon Slayer powers. And with all that being well and good, we also end up moving on to a conference with the Wizard King, as he ends up not only inviting Asta, but the rest of the Magic Knight captains. "I'm glad that all you guys are here to see me today," he would speak, as everyone would actually be weirded out as they would see this kid in the Wizard King's robe, before suddenly they end up realizing that this was the first Wizard King. At this, Yami ends up getting pissed off. "I thought you died, you little shrimp." At this, Julius ends up laughing as he scratches the back of his head, as this is when Nozel would then speak up. Hey, it doesn't matter that he's a child, he's still the Wizard King, treat him with respect." At this, everyone else would then agree, with Yami scoffing, as Asta would then look down at him. "So you're telling me, great, now I won't be able to fight you now," he would say as he looks down in disappointment, with Rio actually appearing and tapping Asta on the back. "It's okay. Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you join my Magic Knight squad?" he would say, but Asta doesn't end up listening to that request as he still ends up pouting. And after all that, fun and comedic, things are out of the way, he ends up finally end up getting to the real matter. That being the future of the Clover Kingdom. He tells them that he had this ability to see into the future, and at first, things were going quite well. In fact, he could see the future quite clearly for the Clover Kingdom, and it wasn't looking that good for them. However, he says that future, he can no longer see it anymore. This will surprise everyone as they gasp as they look at Julius as he continues speaking. "I know this might be hard to believe, but I'm no longer able to look at the future. I don't know exactly what lies for us in the Clover Kingdom. Now, there is a very few amount of, estimation as to why this is happening, but there is one main reason, and this is when Julius then turns to Asta. Asta, I believe that you might be something of an anomaly that's changed the very fabric of reality here," he would say. Now, this will cause everyone to turn their attention onto Asta, who ends up looking up with a bored expression. "Huh?" At this, Julius ends up laughing. "I should have expected that response from you. Listen, Asta, I don't know how to say this, but your abilities, your powers, everything, it contradicts everything in this world." As he begins to get into a deep focus. This is where we end up getting the explanation, as Asta's, his power, his ability, all that stuff isn't supposed to go with the natural flow of this world. Asta's using magic just like everyone else, but the thing is, Asta's magic is different from everyone else. Here, he doesn't have to conjure up spells. Here, he doesn't even need a magic circle. No, he just creates it automatically. And to make it even worse, he doesn't even need a grimoire to use it. And while that's usually not out of the ordinary, for his magic to be this powerful without grimoire, it's unusual, right? Because grimoires are a way for the wizards to reach their full potential, yet Asta, he doesn't even have one. And there's another thing, Asta's magic itself makes no sense. As Dragon Slayer magic, how could that even exist in this world, as dragons in this one are known as a myth? So this shouldn't be possible. He explains to Asta that his very existence here may have been something like a catalyst that causes the very distortion of this entire world, meaning things don't flow naturally anymore. He can't predict the future. Nothing is exactly staying the same. And pretty much this is so far the only explanation here, considering the fact I don't really see Julius here seeing the future, considering the fact that, well, I wouldn't say Asta is most of the reason. I'll say it's because of a certain someone just entered into this dimension by mistake. At this, Asta just shrugs. "Well, I don't really know much about what you just told me, but I just know one thing. My magic is powerful because of the fact I learned it from my father, who's a dragon," he would say with a confident smile. Now, this will cause everyone to look at him weird, as Julius would then have, stars in his eyes. But then suddenly he didn't turn serious. Wait a minute. You said your father was a dragon, huh? Then is there any way for us to meet him? At this, Asta then has a smile on his face before suddenly he ends up turning serious. That would be cool, but unfortunately he is dead, he would say. At this, the cold tone that Asta says it and causes many people to shiver as they look into his eyes, as they show that he was not lying at all. He was dead serious. At this, now this would just end up causing way too much questions. If the dragons really exist, could they end up being an anomaly? And if there is a dragon here, could there be multiple of them? It just didn't make sense to Julius. All he knew is that Asta's origins, or whatever his ability is definitely part of the reason as to why he can no longer see the future. Nothing is very clear right now, but this is when Julius then finally ends up stating the real reason why he brought everyone here. Sure, it was to warn them about his ability not working anymore, but he also explains them another thing. He ended up making 3 estimations. Number 1 being that in this timeline, Nero will be charged for execution. Now, this will catch everyone's attention, especially Asta, as it begins to explain that thanks to Nero's random appearance in the whole matter, and also the fact that she has those horns, this will make her a liability, and people can actually blame her for the entire incident, claiming that she was the demon behind everything that happened. And of course, due to the fact that she has really no history or really any family or really anything at all, any connections with the Clover Kingdom, this would not be a very big drawback on them. Now, this will of course surprise them, as moving on, he also begins to predict 2 more things. Number 1, and this one actually depends on Asta. The Clover Kingdom might actually end up facing very great dangers, or they might actually find peace. However, this fate is honestly not 100% sure, considering the fact that thanks to Asta's, just thanks to him being here, this ends up causing a friction between what could happen and not. And honestly, it depends on the next following events that end up occurring. And the final one is actually one that he's fully confident in, and is the fact that the Clover Kingdom will be participating in a war soon. The main reason for this one is because of the fact that, number 1, the Clover Kingdom is now weakened, and they're no longer exactly in the best position right now, especially now that they lost their Wizard King, since Julius is no longer at full strength. But there's also the fact that the Spade Kingdom have been gathering a large amount of resource and has been gaining a ginormous amount of power from certain connections that they're not 100% sure of. So due to this ends up causing multiple things, and this also ends up putting the Clover Kingdom at a bad position, and especially a position that meaning a beginning of a war. Now, after hearing all of this, the captains are tense, and they honestly are frightened of the whole thing. But this is when Julius then tells them to remain calm, as luckily right now they have too many things to focus on, so adding this along with it wouldn't do no good. But he does tell them to keep on guard and be alert more often than not, as after that he ends up dismissing the meeting before going off to do whatever he does. As after being dismissed, we will then turn our attention to Asta, who right now was walking with a mission. The reason for this, because right now word on the street was going around as people begin to mutter and say that a trial was being taken at the very moment. And Asta, already knowing as he had just been at the meeting, could already tell where this was going. I told her to stay put and she didn't listen. What's with stubborn women nowadays, Asta would think. As this one suddenly he ends up arriving at the courtroom, as the guards there would then rush over to him. Hey, wait right there, they shout, but this one Asta would suddenly knock both of them away. I got no time for you, Asta would say, as this one suddenly he would then burst open the door as he enters into the trial room, as you will see Nero about to be casted judgment, as she was actually about to be claimed guilty, but Asta's appearance will actually end up stopping the verdict right before it was dealt. It seems as if we have someone intruding on our court. That is a clear violation, the judge would then say, as Asta would then look around. Man, screw your court, Asta would shout as he ended up looking at every single one of them, as they would gasp at the audacity of Asta. At this, he ends up walking over to Nero before a bunch of guards begin to surround him. Come on, we're going home. At this, Asta just breaks the chains casually as he tossed them aside, as Nero begins to try talking Asta out of it. No, you idiot, you don't understand. I'm trying to help you, she would say. After all, the blame didn't go on her. It could possibly end up going on Asta as well. Besides, there's no stopping this. She has no birth record here. The kingdom doesn't acknowledge her. And with these horns, she's already pretty much an entire liability right now. There's nothing stopping her fate. But Asta just, completely ignores her as he stares directly at her. I said we're going home. After all, you're part of the Black Bulls, right? At this, Nero's eyes would then go wide as Asta then gives her a smile before suddenly as they begin to walk, all the guards begin to surround him. And exactly where you think you're going. This trial is still commencing. Oh yeah, well I'm ending it. As Asta was about to take another step, this is when suddenly he would then begin to raise his weapon as he then stares at Asta. You are in cahoots with this demon, aren't you? She had turned you into a mindless servant for you to follow her. At this, all the nobles begin to look around as they begin actually to look at Asta. Some of them remember him as he had saved a large amount of the Clover Kingdom, as some nobles actually realize who Asta is and don't want to speak up, but there's many of them who begin to shout out, saying that he was a commoner and that he was disgusting, the fact he was even in their presence. As Asta was hearing this, he was about to leave, but this is when suddenly the judge would then actually let up. But fine, if she's not willing to take the punishment, I guess we must choose someone else. At this, we would then see Marie as she would then be dragged into the courtroom, as this would cause Asta to stop moving. Fine, if the demon doesn't want to pay for her crimes, then her servants will do it for her. At this is when the man would then give the signal as the mages that were surrounding Asta and Nero would then turn their attention onto Marie, as this is when they would then shoot out a magic spell. At this, Marie will look on in shock as she can do nothing more but close her eyes, preparing for, death. But this is when suddenly, as she does, ginormous amount of magic energy begins to shoot out as the spells then get destroyed in an instant. As the men who were attacking, Marie would then finally collapse down to the ground. As many of the nobles feeling the energy would also collapse just due to the pressure, while the judge collapsed down onto his knees. How? He would shout. At this, he looks up only to see the eyes of Asta. At this, Asta's eyes had turned as his eyes were now slitted, looking that of a dragon as he stares directly at him. You know what? I think this child idea was a good one. And I think it's finally time for me to cast my own judgment, Asta would say, as he ends up looking at the judge. And my judgment is death by execution. And I will be your executor. At this, Asta would then begin to charge up a ginormous amount of magic energy into his fists. As he was about to do a dragon's claws, he looks directly at the judge. The judge would watch as Asta jumps towards him, ready to finish him off. But this one suddenly bursting through, we wouldn't see all the Magic Knight captains, including Yami, as he ends up jumping in and blocking Asta's attack. Quickly, we have to use as much force as we can, he would shout. At this, the rest of them would also agree as they end up trying to block Asta's attack, as he was fueled by rage and anger, boosting it even further, as this would take the combined force of the captains, as Asta's attack was enough to nearly legit send most of them flying. As eventually, after a while, the attack ends up letting up, as Asta would stare at the rest of them. At this when suddenly, Nozel and Fuegoleon would then begin to announce, as they actually end up getting an announcement from the Wizard King, where he pretty much states that Nero is supposed to be proven innocent and the trial is supposed to be postponed until they're able to find evidence to prove Nero's innocence. So pretty much, Julius was like, no, you guys don't get to murder someone. So with that being said, and now that the trial is now being, concluded, this will cause everyone to actually look on with a relief expression, while Asta was pissed off. Now, of course, the judge would end up getting up as he, of course, allowed this. However, he would then look at Asta, who then stares back at him, and Asta begins to release a little bit of bloodlust. This will cause him to shake as Asta would then smile. I'll play along with your game. But don't worry, she won't be executed. However, if I see you guys pulling this shit again, I'll make sure to remember every single one of your faces and wipe you off from the face of the earth. You hear me? Everyone says nothing more in the presence of Asta as he nods with a satisfied smile before walking off mockingly. As along with them, we also see Nero, who ends up, looking at Yami, who ends up placing a robe on her, saying that she is a part of the Black Bulls after all. And of course, they were going to defend one of their own. So, of course, seeing this, she would, begin to tear up slightly as she nods her head. And after that, we're now moving on as we're now moving towards the demon investigation. as this is where we're gonna end this part to the what if. Hopefully, you guys do enjoy. Yeah, this was a long ass part. Like legit, I kid you not, I had to stop a few more times to like get some water and drink, cause, jeez, dude, this what if took like very long. I don't know why, guys, but I've been stuttering more often. I don't know why. Like, I know I've been away from what ifs for like a while. Like, I've only been doing them for like recently these few days, but still, like my stuttering is coming back, and I had to stop multiple times and edit out the video to take it out. But still, like it was getting annoying. And I think I found out the reason. I don't know why, but whenever I'm telling these what ifs, I usually go into like ginormous and very complicated words that like you need to do for like, spelling bees or something like that. I don't know why I do it. Maybe because I punish myself. But I end up doing so to like describe things in details, which I'm trying to do less of that, so that way the story can continue on like normally. And you see what I plan to do before I start these what ifs, so that way, because I'm not, since I'm rewatching Black Clover, by the way, so that way I can memorize the story even further. I'm also reading the manga, considering the fact that it's just simply fire, bro. I kid you not, the manga is fire. If you guys do not read manga, I recommend you do. Trust me, you're missing out. But still, moving on, since I usually get sidetracked at this part. So yeah, I'm pretty much just doing all this. I can refresh my knowledge, and that way the things can go by much smoothly. As I already know, I have a problem where I get off track and, the story ends up losing its momentum. But don't worry, I'm planning to fix that, all right? I'm planning to get things back to normal, right? But besides that, guys, this is your host, HD Samurai, and this video has gone on for long enough. So it's your host, and he's out. Peace, and have a lovely day. Oh yeah, and one more thing right before I head off. During the final part, when Yami and the rest of the Magic Knight captains had defended against Asta's attack, the reason why Yami actually had defended against Asta's attack and actually helped out the rest of the Magic Knight captains was because of the fact that Julius had told him that nothing was going to happen to Nero and that everything was going to be okay. But he did ask him to make sure that Asta didn't kill anyone. That's the only reason. If it hadn't been for that, he would have actually teamed up with Asta on that one. But just wanted to let you guys know. And yeah, once again, goodbye and have a lovely day.